Good morning. Let's put this in context, and let me read to you the story of the prodigal son from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. All the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had, traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in desolate living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He gladly had filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off, went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one. Put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now the elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. Called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father's killed the fatted calf, because he got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' And the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" I found the script that we are using this morning in a theological journal. The name of the journal is Word and World, Theology for Christian Ministry, Volume 17, Summer of 1977, Number 3, published quarterly at the Lutheran Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. The editor, Frederick Geiser, wrote an introduction. The editor and editorial board had invited people to write a retelling of Bible stories. They chose 5 of the 120 or so that they received. And Geiser wrote in the introduction, quote, Bible stories practically cry out to be retold again and again more than they want adoration. They want to be turned loose more than they want to be preserved. The Bible is not a story museum. It's a lending library, and a free one at that. The editorial board of Word and World has asked several storytellers to retell a Bible story with a careful combination of playful abandon and witness to God in Jesus Christ. Playful abandon and witness to God in Jesus Christ that will invoke the breath of the Spirit. Unquote. Let me introduce this morning's cast. Taking the role of the father is Michael Ria. Taking the role of the older son, Dwight, is Doug Cummins. Taking the role of the younger son, Wally, David Jolliffe. And this was included in Garrison Keillor's original, being the voice of Bibby the Bimbo from Beirut, Julia Townsley. I will be the voice of the narrator, the pig farmer, and the bartender. A happy day, a sunny street, you're young and in love, life is good, and you're on your way to lunch when suddenly a cold shadow falls and you feel a cold, slimy hand touch your face, and it's your own hand. That's evil. Where does evil come from? Whose fault is it? The American Council on Remorse, a nonprofit organization working for greater contrition on the part of people who do terrible things, brings you today's story, The Prodigal Son.
I run a feedlot operation here in Judea, fattening feeder calves for the Jerusalem market. I'm in partnership with my two sons, younger son Wally, who has itchy feet, and my older son Dwight. One morning about 2 years ago, I came down to breakfast and no Wally. Morning, Dwight.
Morning, Dad.
Have you seen your brother this morning?
The only times I've seen him during the past 6 weeks, he was in his bed.
Well, I promised Harry Shepard I'd be over to his place by 7:30. He got a lost sheep out on the wild and godforsaken place, Deborah Mountain.
Dad, I heard the market report earlier, and it said that fatted calves are down 1 3/4 on the Damascus market. Makes me wonder if maybe lean calves wouldn't have a higher profit margin. And then we could spend more time in the vineyard. Dad, are you listening to me?
I'm sorry, Dwight. It's just, I'm worried about your brother. He just hasn't been himself lately.
Dad, we can't afford to stand still. Look at the Stewarts. They're buying up land left and right. We got to move ahead, plan. If not, we'll lose ground.
Morning, Dad. Morning, Dwight.
Wally, what's wrong? You look a little peaked, son.
Oh, I don't know, Dad. It's some kind of morning sickness. I feel really good at night, and then when I wake up, I just hurt all over.
I noticed a couple of empty wineskins behind the fig tree this morning. Could that be the cause of your morning sickness?
I dropped them and they spilled. Honest, I did. I just dropped them.
Well, where were you taking them, son?
Well, I was putting them outside. Wine needs to breathe, you know, and so do I, Dad. So do I. I read an article the other day in the Assyrian Digest that says bad things may be environmental. I don't know. Maybe I need to get away for a while, get my head on straight, and work out some things.
Well, if that's how you feel, I guess
I was thinking I could take my share of the farm and head out for a while until I get back on my feet. get my head cleared, and then come back a new person.
Dad, could we talk about this over lunch?
Not many days after, the younger son gathered his inheritance together and took his journey into a far country.
I'm walking to a far out land. I'm talking. I got cash in my hand. I'm hot now. Don't you understand? You're looking at a brand new man.
And there wasted his substance and riotous living. He not only found freedom, but he found Bibi the bimbo from Beirut.
Go on, Bibi. Take it off. Take it all off. You Pharisees have to learn how to relax and loosen up. Piano player, give us another song. Hey, bartender, another round for my friends, and make sure you don't serve that light wine. We want the real stuff. It's party time. Well, what's your problem, barkeep?
It's closing time, Mr. Wally. Last round, everyone.
Last round's on me. It's time to party.
Oh, Wally, you're so wonderful. You know how to let go and have a real good time.
That's because I've learned that life is a feast, if you know where to find it. Stick with me, baby, and we'll find it together.
Here's your bill, Mr. Wally.
Life is a feast. Oh, Wally, that's so beautiful. A lot of people place too many restrictions on themselves. Not you, Wally. You have a better sense of who you are. You have that rare quality of trusting yourself, believing in festivity and not negativity, a smile and not denial. Sure, rules are good for people who need them, but not you, Wally. You prefer freedom. You have this tremendous, this great, it's not a structure thing, you know. Your energy is so focused, like a locust.
Let's see, that's 400, that's 10, 11, 12, and 35. Oh, wait. I've got another nickel in here. $412.40. That's it. That's the last of my money. That's all I have. Amazing.
You okay, Mr. Wally? Do you need a ride home?
I'm fine. Home? Oh, I'll find a place to stay tonight.
Wally, listen. It's been great. 3 of the best weeks of my life, but I've got to go. Bye.
After he'd spent all of his money, there arose a mighty famine in that land. He began to feel the pinch. So he went and lived with a farmer who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. Well, son, have you ever fed pigs before?
Well, no. Pigs were not exactly the animal of choice back home. But I have a lot of calves. Do you just dump the husks and swill down in front of them and let them go?
Look, boy, there's a lot more to it than that. Usually, we require pig feeders to have at least 4 years of professional experience. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll take a chance on you, boy, and let you join my pig feeding internship program.
Well, that's awful nice of you, sir. What does it pay?
Pay? Son, I'm offering you the opportunity of a lifetime to learn the pig business from the mud up.
You mean I'll just sleep out here and eat with these pigs?
Come on, boy, make up your mind. There's a lot of folks out of work around here. What's it going to be?
Oh, fine, I'll take the job. I just wanted to clear in my own mind. Come on, you hogs. Suey, suey. Come on. Piggy, suey, pig.
Feeding 1,000 pigs was hard work, and it was hot, and he smelled like it was not fun. Then one day, Wally thought to himself,
how many of the hired servants of my father have bread enough to spare, and here I am starving to death? Maybe I'll go home and say to Dad, Daddy, I've really botched things up, and I'm not worthy to be called your son. So please just take me on as one of the hired hands. No, that doesn't sound right. I'll pack my things and go to him and say, Father, it was a great learning experience, and now I'm back looking for an entry-level position in the ag business. No, that's not going to work either. I'll go to my father and say, hi, Dad. How have you been? Me? Oh, just fine. Had a wonderful trip, met some wonderful people. Say, Dad, you wouldn't have anything around here to eat, would you?
And so he left the pigs and began to hitchhike home.
I'm ruined. I lost my goods, so I'm going back to my roots.
And yet, when he was a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion on him, ran and fell on his neck and kissed him.
Oh, Wally, my boy, bring some clean clothes and a ring and some shoes, and not those running shoes. Get the dress shoes and a ring. Make it 2 rings. Start a fire in the barbecue pit. We'll cook that fatted calf, that special one we've been saving.
Dad, I've got a little problem. You see, Dad, I've been on a high husk diet.
Dwight, look who's here. It's Wally.
Nice to see you.
Dwight, we're having veal tonight. Wally's home.
Oh, I'm going to get some of that calf, Dad. I'll be right back.
Dad, I don't want to sound negative or anything like that, but how many years have I been working with you?
Well, your whole life.
Have I ever disobeyed you, Dad?
Not as far as I can remember.
And have you ever given me a fatted calf and thrown a big party for me and my friends?
Well, no, but son...
But the minute this bozo comes hoofing it home with his tail between his legs...
But your brother was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost,
Dad,
and now he's found.
Dad, you are not listening to what I'm saying. Now listen, you have not ever run up to me and hugged me.
Well, to tell you the truth, Dwight, I've never been what you could call a great hugger. I guess I kind of got carried away.
Hey, have some calf, you guys. The barbecue sauce is wonderful. Sure is good fatted calf, Dad. Sure does beat eating husks.
Well, have you ever stopped to think who fatted that calf? That was our best fatted calf, Dad. The best one. Try to think how I feel. I'm hoeing corn all day, come in bone tired and find this pig manure smelling brother of mine with a keg of beer on ice and my calf on the barbecue. And my rings on his fingers. My ring! Dad, you promised that ring to me, but oh no, you got to give it to that wino bimbo chasing pig-smelling weasel who comes dragging his butt in the door. This is great. This is just great, Dad. It's terrific. Maybe I'll go sleep with the pigs, seeing as you go for that. See you later, Wally. Help yourself to the rest of my stuff. Go on, take my Calvin Klein's, my Rolex, my Lexus, my rooms. Don't worry about me. I'll be in the pig pen.
Be sure to be with us next week when the American Council on Remorse, the only organization in the world dedicated to the proposition that contrition is good for you, will bring you the true story of a bunch of rascals who thought by killing the landowner's son they could claim jump his property. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Julia. And thank you, Garrison Keeler. Now, I did leave out, Garrison Keeler had the prodigal son meet the 5 foolish virgins in his travels, and that went on for some time. And then he meets the Good Samaritan, but he refuses help from the Good Samaritan. And so we eliminated those 2 sections for time and having an umpteen million readers. So what'd you think? Retell the story. What does it do to you? Anybody? Okay. You want to get one? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, you can relate to it easily because we've all been lost at one time or another and wanted to go home. And then also, I've been the one grumbling when a sibling gets more what I think is, better treatment. So very easy to identify with.
Anybody else?
I'm glad we can take a Bible story and grab it by the shoulders and shake it and see if there's any loose change left in the pockets for you and me, the year of our Lord 2019.
So I've got actually the similar comment to Ray. I really appreciated the permission to retell it. I feel like you have to read the King James Version or the New Revised. You have to read the official version every year. But the idea that it's okay just to do it differently. I appreciate that.
Anybody else?
I think part of the message of this story is that parents are human beings and they, just have a natural affinity to certain of their children, and they appreciate the good and the not so good in each one of them. And, Dwight just wasn't a real fun guy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, over here.
Bernadette's comment rang true with my experience as well, that often I hear a parable of Jesus as if it were kind of a ridiculous story, a fable, something that could never really take place. But there's something about this portrayal of it, having removed it from the biblical text, as you said, Dave, the King James version, that allows me to see just how easy and how often repeated this is in life. Laura Walsh's sermon today also drives that point home.
It is thought by many people that a parable, when you boil it right down to its nitty-gritty, is a comparison. The wise and foolish versions is pretty easy. Comparison between wise and foolish. In this parable, there's several comparisons going on. But the major one seems to be between the father who will accept and the son who will not accept. And that goes back to the opening line. There were people grumbling to Jesus because he was eating with tax collectors and sinners. Of course, there's a comparison between the younger son who extravagantly wastes and the father who extravagantly welcomes. But a parable, in its nitty-gritty, is a comparison. And the big comparison, I believe, is in the last end of the parable between the father and the older son. And most of the rest of it is fluff. It's just background material. What do you think about that?
Upset because the older son is generous. Because the father is being generous. The older son is jealous and at his generosity for the younger one. How can you treat him this way when I'm the good one? And I think that comes through in a lot of different parables. It's the jealousy of the generosity that people can't handle. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's kind of my theory.
Mary Jo.
Well, I'm thinking of something else kind of on this same vein as this was written, and that is, how many nights did that father sit on the front porch and wait for his son to come home? And how many nights did Mama turn on the light and put the key under the mat? When you have a child who you don't know where they are or what they're doing, I think this parable somehow misses the anguish of the father involved in this.
Yeah.
This doesn't really apply to this reading, which both sons leave being pretty rotten. But in the original scripture, I liked the fact the father validated the needs of the son that had stayed at home at the end. All that's mine is yours. So he needed that kind of
feedback from his dad, and I got the perception he had not gotten it enough over his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We spoke in staff meeting that often the parable gets labeled the parable of the prodigal son. Chuck pointed out in staff meeting that prodigal doesn't mean returning home. It means just profligate. We also discussed that some, like Henry Nouwen, described this as the parable of the two lost sons, that both of them are lost. But there's something about this reading, and also, again, Laura's sermon. I won't give that away for those who haven't heard it yet. But there's something about this portrayal that makes me think about all three characters as being lost. And I wonder if Garrison Keillor allows us to see a complicated father, a growth in the father in a way that I usually miss in the parable. If you think about it, the younger son is a flat character. He starts wasteful and he kind of ends wasteful. We see that in Garrison Keillor's portrayal. The older son is perhaps a flat character. We don't know whether he goes in at the end to celebrate, but at least as the curtain falls, he is still resentful. But the father, that line that Michael read about maybe I'm not such a great hugger, allows me to see that maybe that father is starting to realize his contribution to his preferred son's profligate life. And I saw that and heard that more clearly here today than I ever have. I really appreciate that.
Suzanne has got one over here. All right, Jerry.
Yeah, for me, it's a story about unconditional love and how unfair that is. You know, it's easy for me to think about loving unconditionally when it doesn't ask anything from me. But, you know, to identify with the older son and how unfair that feels. And yet, the father's love for him was unconditional too, but you know, when you look at the younger son and how irresponsible he was, and really put the father in jeopardy because he took the father's inheritance, his pension, and went out and squandered it on loose living, and just how unjust that is. And yet, you know, all of us would yearn to be loved unconditionally. And it's a very difficult concept to accept in a society that wants justice and wants fairness. And there was nothing fair about that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I might tag along with that. To me, the real tragedy I'm hearing today, the real tragedy of the older son is what he represents in so many of us. It was supposedly truer then, but is still true. The idea that everything is limited, that if I have power, it's at the expense of yours, or if I have wealth, it's at the expense of yours, or if I have success, security, it's at your expense, and vice versa. If you have it, it's at my expense. The fact that the son was stuck in that paradigm when what was exploding around him through the mercy toward the younger son and the extravagance perhaps of the father, what was exploding around him was the kingdom of God, where there is an extravagance of security and esteem and wealth and affection and power. There is an extravagance of it if we would only see it, if we would only live into it, if we would only yield it and share it and ask for it. And each of these characters, well, for me, the real tragedy is that the elder son is confined, boxed in to that way of seeing and believing and acting in the world.
Jeff.
This story is very true to life. I have two sons, 4 years apart. And the older one was always having a hard time getting a grip on things, not doing well on school, misbehaving. And the younger son just sort of flowed smoothly and everything. And after a few years, the younger son jumped on us and said, "How come you're always paying all this attention to Matt? doing all this for him, and you just take me for granted. And we said, well, that's true. It was true. And we just took him for granted because he was just flowing smoothly through life. So those feelings, and he wasn't resentful. He was just bringing up the point. But it's a true story.
Yeah. We have a hard time dealing with unconditional love. I mean, for most of us, just ordinary loving is difficult. But unconditional love, that about drives us out of our heads. It blows our mind. The Father loves the younger son unconditionally as he loves the older son unconditionally. And who knows if they even understood it? Do we understand unconditional love? Well, thank you all, and stay around. There'll be another Reader's Theater one of these days.